you or someone you love have scoliosis? Are you wondering what's next? What is life going to be like from now on? Or is this even a big deal? Hi, my name's Dave Butler, and welcome to the Scoliosis Experience. We are here to talk with real people, both patients, parents, and providers, to bring hope and clarity to the road ahead. Thanks for joining us, and let's get started. Hello and welcome to today's episode. Today I talk to Garrett Batty, who has an amazing story about scoliosis. A little bit of background on Garrett. When he was born, he had a condition called Tetralogy of Fallot. He had a heart condition that has resulted in multiple surgeries. He had scoliosis from the time he was a child as well. And his history is pretty amazing, with needing to have scoliosis fusion when he was a teenager and being paralyzed from that surgery and coming back from paralysis. Pretty cool story on overcoming challenges and trials, but his main message is to not limit yourself, to not allow yourself to be limited with scoliosis and the problems you might have with scoliosis. So this is a fantastic episode for anyone who is looking for motivation to push through challenges. It's great for people who are looking at possible surgery or are having complications from surgery. One thing that I want to point out before the episode, and one thing that during the episode we point out, is that this is a very rare case of a paralysis with a spinal fusion, and this does not happen very often. It's very rare, and so if you are looking at getting surgery, this is not something that is likely to happen. This shouldn't stop you from getting the care that you need, especially if your curve is progressing to a point where it needs surgery. And Garrett talks about that a little bit as well in this episode. I really enjoyed recording this episode, and I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from Garrett. So here he is. All right, Garrett, thanks for being here with us on the Scoliosis Experience podcast. Let me introduce Garrett a little bit. I've known Garrett for, I don't know how many years I've known you.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Garrett is the brother to a brother-in-law of mine, and so yeah, we've known each other for a while. And he's also a patient of ours that we see with scoliosis and things like that. So I thought it would be really cool to do an episode with you, because I think you have a really cool story and a really cool experience that you can share with others that have scoliosis. So I'll give you a sec to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dave. As you said, my name is Garrett Batty, and I've been a patient of yours for a couple of months now. I'm glad to be on the podcast. I've listened to a few of the episodes and been inspired by people that are telling their stories, and educated a little bit by people that are sharing their experiences. Because it's not often that, I don't know, maybe I'm rare, but I don't often identify people with scoliosis and go and talk to them and say, oh, tell me about your experiences. And so to hear people share that has been very eye-opening, and it's been, I don't want to say comforting, but certainly it's been nice to hear of their experiences, their similar experiences.
Well, and I think it's interesting, because I do talk to people about their experience, just as the nature of talking to them about their scoliosis before we treat them. And so for me, it's always been normal, but it's interesting to hear you say that, that's something that you haven't. You're not talking to people with scoliosis about their experiences. Obviously, I mean, you're not seeing someone on the street and saying,
right, I'm not actively
hey.
seeking people out.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that it's helpful to see those.
Yeah, there's use for it.
Yeah, cool.
I don't know if that's a good introduction or not.
I think that's a great introduction.
Who I am. I'm a local guy. I'm a father of 4, married 21 years, live here in Utah, and I work professionally as a filmmaker.
Awesome.
So that's me.
Make some amazing films. I've seen quite a few of those.
I have a good time doing it, yeah.
So tell us kind of your scoliosis history. Diagnosis, or even before that, kind of give us an idea of how this entered your life a little bit.
Yeah, I was in my memory, I was born with scoliosis, and it was ever present. I don't know the degree of severity or how it affected me uh, as I started to grow. But I do remember. I mean, it was always kind of a constant thing. I was born also with a rare condition called Tetralogy of Fallot, which is a heart defect, and they say that those sometimes frequently accompany each other.
Uh-huh.
And so I think it was always just kind of part of the thing. Oh, Garrett has heart and back issues, and so I'd go in for my annual checkups. I had open heart surgery when I was 6 to kind of to correct some of those heart defects, but it was always in my mind unseparated from the back issues. So I'd go in, and each year or so they'd take an X-ray and measure the curvature of my spine, and I don't know that it affected me any other way than that. I just knew that I'd have an annual checkup.
It was kind of part of your life at that time.
It was part of my
Just
life.
expected.
Yeah, and so any limitations in mobility or sports or energy, I could never really attribute to whether it was a heart or a back or whatever it was. But I didn't ever feel like I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I mean that makes sense. That's all you knew was, you had a heart condition since you were born, scoliosis since you were born, so you didn't really know any different than that, right?
Right,
So it was
right.
normal.
I do know that my parents were always telling me to stand up straight.
Oh yeah.
More so than my siblings. There's 6 kids, and they're all normal height, and I'm definitely much smaller than the rest of them.
I think it was totally unfair.
I was always being told to stand up straight.
Right. So so it started early on, and it sounds like, I mean, with the heart surgeries, I wonder how much that has to play into the development of scoliosis, and I don't know if there's been any research on that. A heart surgery can increase scar tissue and stuff like that. Who knows? Or they both came on even before the first surgery. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know, and I'd also tie into the lungs issue. Scoliosis, your lung is, from what I understand, the curvature sometimes compresses a lung, and so as your heart's pumping and trying to get oxygenated blood around your body, and your lung has less of that oxygen to give, I think it all kind of worked together or worked against,
Right.
regular growth.
So growing up as a kid and going into your teenage years, did you feel limited by it? Did you feel like it stopped you from doing? You said it didn't stop you from doing things that you wanted to do, but did you feel a limitation with that?
I don't think I did. I would credit that to, maybe there weren't limitations. I mean, I played soccer. We lived in Texas. I played in Texas soccer leagues, and I felt limited by just my height, but which is certainly related to scoliosis. But it wasn't ever an issue of saying, I have scoliosis, therefore I can't do
Right.
such and such.
Right.
So no, I did soccer. I skied, avid skier, and played high school football my freshman year in high school. And so it says a lot about our team that I made the team, but but I did. I went out for and played.
You guys were amazing. That's what it says.
I
Right?
got a grass stain.
I got
That
a
was a
grass.
big accomplishment in the football team.
Awesome. So, we're in your freshman year. Kind of tell us what happened.
Yeah,
during high
freshman
school.
year, and as is from what I understand, as somebody starts to hit puberty, they start to grow, and so the doctors, I went in for my annual checkup or X-ray, and they said, okay, the curve in your spine as you're starting to grow is increasing. Therefore, we feel like we need to address this rather than just kind of let it play out. And so the decision was made to insert rods into my spine, Harrington rods, 3 rods inserted. And the way the procedure was described to me is that they would go and straighten out my back a little bit with rods and fuse the vertebrae. Therefore, it would maybe make things a little bit straighter and then stop any risk of continued increased curve. as a freshman, it sounded great. I interpreted that as, hey, I'm going to go in to surgery, come out a week later, an inch and a half taller, and with no back issues. And
Right.
yeah, take a week and recover, and then I'd be back jumping on the trampoline, skiing, things like that.
Well, and I think that's a lot of my patients who are looking at having surgery. It's just the teenage mind, I think, is like, okay, well, I'll go in and get this fixed and then move on with my life.
Yeah.
And sometimes that goes differently than expected.
It did. It did for me. And so we went in July. You know, it was like, I know what you did last summer. That was this was my summer experience. I went in July after my freshman year. They did the surgery, and I remember waking up from the surgery, and the doctors were huddled around me and asked me, you know, hey, how you feeling? And I was obviously groggy and still probably under anesthesia. And they told me to, you know, had me, you know, I could see them poking and prodding my legs and had me move my legs, and an expression came over them, you know, the wide-eyed expression, and they put the mask back on me and went back in. And I woke up a few days later, is my next memory with them, you know, waking up and the doctor's kind of at the foot of my bed saying, oh, he's awake. And everybody gathered around and said, okay, now move your legs again. And what I didn't know is I hadn't moved my legs when they woke me up the first time.
Oh, wow.
Nor the second time. Mm-hmm. And so it was a day or two, and they came in and said, okay, let's have a talk. During the surgery, there were complications, and they went back in to try to address what those complications were. They found that there were bone chips that had dropped or severed or pinched or whatever it is in my spinal column.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that was not the ideal scenario, and that I would be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life.
Wow.
So that was certainly not the plan. And I tell this hesitantly because I don't talk about this story a lot, because I certainly wouldn't want to dissuade anybody from getting treatment that they need for scoliosis. And to this day, I don't like going to hospitals. I don't like anything about that. I mean, it certainly had an effect on me, but I don't want to promote that. You know, if somebody needs treatment,
right? And we mentioned that before we did this podcast, that, you know, this is something that this doesn't happen very often at all.
Right.
And so, yeah, this shouldn't be something that dissuades someone from doing surgery if it's indicated.
Sure.
And yeah, the experience is definitely not common.
Right.
And yeah, so I think that's an important point to make.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I mean the story doesn't end there. I mean there's you know, it was in an intensive care unit there for about 10 days, and then they said, okay, we're going to transfer you to kind of an occupational therapy where you'll learn how to function in a chair. You got to learn how to sit up, slide down a board into a chair so you can wheel around.
Get you functional in a wheelchair.
Get you functional, yeah. And here's how to keep your hands clean when you're wheeling and eating and things like that. In my mind, I said, no, that's not for me. That's not my life. And so they sent me to the hospital psychologist to try to kind of get me to wrap my brain around that. You know, through you know, I'm a faithful person through prayer and miracles and hard work. You know, I would train for occupational therapy during the days, and then at night, when the therapists were away and the doctors were gone, I would, you know, pull myself up on the edge of my bed and stand, kind of balance on my feet on the edge of the bed.
Because when everyone was out of the room.
Yeah, because they didn't want me doing that.
Right. And as a therapist who has worked in hospitals, that just, yeah, that's crazy.
There was a nurse there, or a therapist, however the term is, who I'm sure they knew that that's what I was doing.
Right.
But he was very conscientious of helping me do that safely. So he'd make sure that they give me a big plastic back brace that you take off when you're laying down. Right. He'd make sure that I was kind of close to my bed at night so I could put that on and stand safely.
Yeah.
But anyway, I did that for 40 days, and my goal was to make it out of the hospital for school when school started.
Mm-hmm.
And I once movement started returning to my legs and numbness wore down and abilities started returning or I relearned, I regained. Therapists started to say, okay, let's shift your plan from wheelchair lifestyle to more of an ambulatory lifestyle.
Right.
So yeah, 40 days later, I was able to walk out of the hospital on hand crutches and continue in therapy from then on out.
Well, and it's interesting because one of my thoughts is one of my questions is what were your thoughts when they told you that you're going to be in a wheelchair? But it sounds like your thought was, nope, it's not for me.
Yeah. Yes, and again, I want to be so sensitive because I'm in therapy with other spinal injury patients who didn't have that thought, or who did, but the result was they didn't walk out. So I want to be very careful and say,
right.
Oh, because of my hard work and faith, here I am.
Right. Sometimes that's not in the cards.
That's not in the cards.
Yeah.
I get that, and I think that they would be trying to be very careful and say, hey, here's this kid that might not, everybody might have that idea,
right.
And that might not be the result for everybody. Yeah, to answer your question, that my thought was, no, that's not for me. But I had heart-to-heart conversations with other people in therapy,
right,
that was for them, and their journey is acceptance and success with that mindset.
Right. Yeah, you can definitely have success with, the life of needing to be in a wheelchair.
Yes, absolutely.
There's no problem with that, but for you, it worked out.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes, for me it was a different plan.
So before surgery, you mentioned that you didn't feel like you were held back by scoliosis or your heart necessarily. How did that change after surgery?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, today, that was 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago. And today I have limited motion. I still have 3 rods in my spine, and my spine is fused. So tasks is sort of like bending over to tie shoes have to be planned out.
Right, right.
Okay, I got to find a place where can I bend over and get back up again. So the paralysis, in my mind, has left me with a big limp when I walk around. And I actually had a conversation the other day with a brother-in-law on my wife's side, and we were talking about activities or things like that. I said, oh, sometimes I don't do that just because of my limp. And he says, wait, you limp? And there's a guy I've known for 22 years, and it occurred to me that I don't know, maybe as a scoliosis patient, we are our worst critics, or
definitely,
we often see ourselves so much more flawed, I'll say, or than others. And that's been an eye-opening conversation of late, and I think relevant to this podcast is that when you say how does it affect me, I think mentally it affects me more than physically.
Yeah,
and that's important for me to learn.
Yeah, and I think that's important for most patients with scoliosis or people with any problem to learn that we tend to see it more looking at it from our perspective than what other people actually notice.
Yes, very much so. I am an incredibly self-conscious person, and that might be more common mentality than I realize. But when I walk across a room, I know in the back of my head that people are just staring at me, just wondering when I'm going to fall over, or if I'm okay, or what's going on, or why does he ache so badly? Which I don't,
right.
And I don't. But in my mind, that's how I perceive myself.
Yeah,
and that's refreshing to hear from other people that have scoliosis, or other people in general, that no, we're all just we're all doing okay.
Right. Yeah, we're all doing okay. We're not. I see people with very small scoliosis curves that think everyone in the world can see it. If I'm in a bathing suit, everyone can see this and is thinking, wow, she's or he's messed up, and most of the time
that's not the case.
Other people aren't noticing that. They're not, like you said, we're kind of our own worst critics in a lot of different ways, not just physical appearance and things like that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And I probably deviated from your question as far as how it affects me.
No, you're good.
Okay.
That was a good
Mentally,
tangent. I like
mentally,
that
that's how it affects me.
Yeah.
Physically, certainly the rods have stopped me from being real flexible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like tying your shoes, like we already talked about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I still, I still enjoy skiing and going on walks and playing pickleball and whatever else old people do.
Old?
Yeah,
you are not old, Garrett.
I guess I shouldn't say that. No, it doesn't.
It doesn't stop you from doing any of those things. I know that your family is big into skiing, so did it change your ability in skiing?
I feel that it did. I feel that the surgery did. Certainly, I mean, I even have limited sensitivity on my right side.
Right.
So limited motion and feeling. And so that is going to affect things for sure. But I don't know. I couldn't keep up with my brothers beforehand, and I can't today. So no.
Well, I can't keep up with one of your
now.
brothers
Now
either,
I just have
so.
something to blame it on.
There you go. There you go. So, yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the struggles immediately after surgery and just generally, but were there any other struggles with scoliosis or anything like that that we haven't talked about?
I think that a struggle might have been pain, and I'm trying to remember if I felt a lot of back pain before scoliosis. I'd like to say that I had, slight back aches or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that is no longer the case. Since the surgery, I do not feel back pain. I don't think that that's because of nerve damage. I think that those rods and fusions
it's not moving.
Are moving around.
Yeah.
And so, so that's a big plus.
Yeah, you do have some sensitivity, though, on your back, right? Like just hypersensitivity or...
Oh, yeah.
Or that
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yes, I guess back aches are,
right.
They don't affect me as they would have prior to the surgery.
Right.
But yes, that's a good point. If somebody touches or, pokes me in the back, it shoots jolts of
right. Yeah, we try to avoid that.
Yeah.
Try to avoid that. So, if we move on a little bit and think about just generally, like mentally, how do you feel like you were able to meet the challenges that you've had? Like, what do you feel like helped mentally with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Any challenges with my scoliosis, I always associate now to the surgery and to the results of the surgery and the paralysis and things like that. And so my mental challenges or my mental journey on overcoming or meeting these challenges is always paired with that. How do I meet this challenge of my physical limp or my limitations? And that, as far as meeting those challenges, I think I try not to be limited by anything mentally or physically. If I have a wonderful marriage and wonderful kids and a successful career, and I think that it is important to recognize that yes, with scoliosis, while there might be physical limitations, it should not be anything that you can't deal with. And it has helped me see the goodness of people, where I have a perhaps this exaggerated mental awareness, let's see, I want to say that right, where I'm maybe, I'm my worst critic, and yet there are wonderful people that are just, they see me for who I am, or they see anybody for who they want to be, and help them achieve that and get there. Right. And I think that's inspiring. That's
seeing how other people view others.
Yes,
I think is helpful.
Yeah, it's helpful to take a cue from that and say, okay, hey, if they're not judging me, I should not judge myself like this and just treat myself like a normal person.
That's a good point. Good point. in physical therapy and in scoliosis therapy, you're what we would call a complicated patient because
I've been called worse.
mentally and everything else.
Yeah, no.
Because I mean, you've had paralysis, you have Tetralogy of Fallot, you have a spinal fusion with scoliosis. There's a lot of things that makes you kind of a complex patient from a therapist's perspective.
Sure.
I've actually really enjoyed working with you with scoliosis, partially because since we've known each other for a while, when I got trained in scoliosis treatment, I mean, I can pick out scoliosis in people fairly easily now. And I remember years ago, I was like, man, I want to work with Garrett on that scoliosis. But I mean, I never said anything, and then
Sure.
and then one day I come into the room and there sits Garrett, and we're ready to rock and roll. It was exciting. But tell the listeners about what that was like. I mean, as far as you're comfortable telling
About our experience,
how you've done in treatment, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I'll preface it by saying yes, that I was certainly aware of your study or your field of interest, or but had no idea that you were like the expert. I mean, and I'm not just saying that to build you up. I mean, you've been very, very sensitive to my condition and never approached me saying, "Hey, let me help you out," or "Hey, ever thought, hey, stand up straight." And yet, so lately I've been thinking, I've got some time, and so I was thinking I'd love to check out, to have a checkup with my scoliosis and see how it's been. It's been a few years, several years since my last checkup, and I know that I should get it checked out, and so that's why I gave you a call and said, "Hey, what do you think?" Was not expecting what this months later to have received the level of help that I've received. What was your question?
So just kind of describe to the level that you want to describe what we've done, what you've done, what you've learned.
Yeah.
Kind of your experience in getting it treated, because you came for like a scoliosis checkup or for a specific reason.
Yes. Oh yeah. So I was having, my annual heart checkup again. I've had several other heart surgeries since this back surgery, and my doctor, I was having a shortness of breath and some tingling sensations in my legs that weren't common, and so I went to my heart doctor and said, "Hey, okay, here's what I'm reading on the internet, and it's definitely a heart issue." And he just looked at me and said, "It's scoliosis." And I said, "That's not true. I've had scoliosis my whole life, and these are new symptoms." And he said, "Okay, go talk to somebody that looks at scoliosis." Yeah. And so that's why I said, "Okay." I said, "Well," he said, "talk to a back doctor." And I said, "Well, how about this guy who's an expert in scoliosis?"
Right. This quack that's over there.
Yeah, it's my brother-in-law, and he's done this, and it's like one of those things. Like the doctor's like, no, he actually said, "Oh, even better."
Oh, good.
Even better. He says, "With these heart issues, your scoliosis is certainly tied to that, and go talk to him." Okay, all right. So that's why I made the appointment.
Right.
And I said, "Hey, I've got these tingling sensations, and I've got this shortness of breath that I'd love to figure out. I'd love to go back to my heart doctor and say, 'See, it's my heart.'" And so then you put together a plan. We came in every week for a while. We did some simple exercises, and I'm sure that there's reason for them. In my limited knowledge perception, it's a combination of stretching and breathing. Yeah, a little bit of strength improvement, but you put together. It was fun, our first meeting, because you had me sit down and you could poke and prod exactly where it needed to be to kind of get me sitting straighter, and then you're saying, "Oh, this is exactly how this is." And I felt like if I'm an expert in film, right? If I'm watching a scene and say, "Okay, here are the problems with this scene,"
right?
The cuts are too pacey, the camera angle's off, the lighting's a little bit low.
Stuff I would have no idea.
And you have no idea. And you're like, "Oh yeah, of course, now I see it."
Right.
And so that's what it was for me. It's like, I've had this for 30 years, and now I see how to, okay, start with my pelvis, build up, and think all these things. So now, every week, as I'm doing these exercises, you sent me a website, and I'm going through and kind of checking off the exercises, and it's become a mindset. I'm like, 2-3 weeks into it, suddenly my tingling isn't there anymore.
Dang it, you can't go back to your doctor.
No, I'm going back to my doctor. Yeah, my tingling isn't there. And a month into this, my wife says, I think you're walking straighter. Which I wish I would have come 30 years ago. You weren't around. But
I wasn't around.
Whenever you opened, I wish I would have knocked on your door and been your first patient.
I was 11 years old, 30 years ago.
Okay, all right.
That may have been a little tough. So, I think sometimes as a therapist that deals with this, this is just normal everyday stuff to me. It's just this is just what we do. We correct from the pelvis and work our way up, and I mean, to me, it's not rocket science, and they're simple exercises too.
Right.
But the key is doing them, and as you do them, I mean, what differences have you noticed with? I mean, you talked about your wife noticing walking. You talked about kind of more self-awareness, and the tingling going down. Any other things that you noticed with that?
No, I mean, I go on my morning walks now without getting shortness of breath. I mean, I feel like you measure my lung capacity, and so we've seen a slight increase, but even then, just kind of the constant breathing. I'm aware of my breathing now and pay better attention to that. It has been a good investment. It seems kind of trivialize it, but it's been a great use of time. And again, I wish I'd been doing this years prior to this.
Right. And I think the more research we get into scoliosis treatment, and the more it's accessible to people, I think the better results we're gonna get like this. And it's great to hear that things are changing. We worked on limping a little bit. Do you feel like you can control your perceived limp at this point?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I know how to continue to work on that. I know what to do, and I think that has been kind of one of the big mind shifts. Is that I should address these things, like with scoliosis. Even as a kid, it's not going to go away. Right. The 14-year-old kid starting to grow. The doctor's not going to say, well, maybe you'll grow out of this. That's not the case. And so we addressed it. And then this 30-year gap that I've kind of ignored it. And like, okay, well, I guess that's taken care of. Now I can check it off my list.
Right.
And that shouldn't be the case. Like, this has been helpful to say, there are daily exercises that I can do that are going to help me deal with either the mental or the physical, not challenges, but just awareness of scoliosis. And I love now that this has become a part of my life that I am talking more openly about. With my brother-in-law, who says, hey, I didn't even know you had a limp. Again, these conversations are coming up because I feel like these issues they're part of our lives, and we should address them and not let them limit us, but kind of own them.
Well, and before you talked about how you're kind of hyper aware of things and aware that you have a limp, and other people may not notice it, but you're aware of that. And I think sometimes you don't want to talk about it because you don't know what to do about it. Like, you don't think there's anything you can do about it. So I'm just gonna put that on a shelf, and not deal with it. But once you learn how to address it, and learn how to actually, say your limp, for instance, once you learn that there's something you can do for it,
right,
that might make it less noticeable, even if people aren't noticing it already. But for you mentally, I think it's kind of empowering. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that 100%. And yeah, you say we're going to put it on a shelf mentally, but for me, that shelf is like the first thing you see when you open the front door, not other people. So I've been, fooling myself and like hiding this, carrying this big, like every morning when I wake up, it's the first thing, first thing to wake up, get out of bed, walk to the bathroom. I'm, limping the whole way, just going, not down harder, but like, okay,
Right.
this is me still.
Yeah.
And now to say, okay, this is me, and here's how I'm dealing with it, is so great.
Yeah, you're in a different mental place with that.
Very much so.
It's awesome. So, what advice do you have? Like, let's say someone is diagnosed with scoliosis, or they're looking at having surgery, or they have complications from surgery, or anything like that. What's the main advice you would give them?
First, I'd say welcome to the welcome to the group, the exclusive group.
Oh yes, very exclusive.
And I think we've discussed about not being self-critical, not criticizing. You haven't done anything wrong that that's given you scoliosis. Or I think advice that I would give. We've addressed not being hard on yourself, be self-critical, and then I'd be welcome. Here's this wonderful challenge, wonderful experience, opportunity for growth that you have with scoliosis, and to address it, to not make it a hidden part of you. I think that's been helpful for me this past couple of months.
Yeah, that's great, and I think that's a lot of my patients, especially my adult patients. My adult patients can benefit from that, because going through, teenage years with bracing or just body image issues, being able to do something about it and not just put it on that shelf that we talked about.
Yeah, I love that. As far as body image goes, I think that is key, especially for teenagers, to know that we are our worst critics. That
Yes.
no one is standing around looking at somebody with scoliosis going, they got scoliosis. Like, this is what is wrong with them. We are the only ones that are doing that. We sit ourselves, look in the mirror, study ourselves, like, oh, what if I lean like this? What if I stand like this? What if I suck in my gut? Whatever I can do to hide this thing.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Don't let it limit you that way.
Because chances are those people who you think are criticizing you are criticizing themselves just as much as you think that, just as much as you are yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Last thing, is there anything specific that you feel like you've learned? We've talked about a lot of stuff, and maybe we've already talked about that, but what's the main thing that you've learned with having scoliosis, kind of the main takeaway that people can take away from this podcast?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I have learned in my life is not to feel limited, not to be limited. Whether it's scoliosis or heart issues or paralysis or being the shortest sibling, whatever it is, don't limit yourself. Don't let that limit you. We live in an amazing time where there are solutions to whatever we're dealing with, or there are people that are going to walk with us along the way through what we're dealing with, whether that's a family member or a spouse or a friend or a therapist, a doctor, whatever it is. We do not need to carry these burdens, if we want to call it that, or these unique issues that we're dealing with. We do not need to carry those alone. We don't need to limit ourselves, and we're not alone in this journey.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thanks for doing this episode with me. I think it's been great.
This has been great. It's been helpful to talk, and thanks for the past couple of months. It's been nice.
You're welcome.